the ANC is going to have to make the decision to kick the DA out. Is that accurate?
Now, if the ANC wants to kick us out at the same time as we have Trump piling on the tariff pressure, the ANC is going to be responsible for a recession the likes of which we have rarely seen. Paul Mashatile wants the DA out of the GNU because they want Cyril Ramaphosa out of the ANC. So the ANC is deeply divided, and they're deeply divided around their own internal succession dynamics. Paul Mashatile wants to succeed Cyril Ramaphosa, and they have an elective conference in 2027. Fikile Mbalula wants to succeed Cyril Ramaphosa, and he's up against Paul Mashatile. And so I can continue. The ANC only think of themselves. They have an absolute dearth of...
Guys, Helen Zille is just dropping bombshells back to back in this season where we know the GNU is actually argued to, I think, probably facing a breakage apart. So she's actually really giving some insider, thoughts on what her processing of what's really going on. First of all, she actually thinks and argues that the ANC doesn't seem to have come to the realization that the DA is now a part of the government of national unity, all right? That the ANC still wants to carry out decisions and all of that as though it still had the majority 50% plus one. This is Helen Zille's argument, if you listen to her correctly, and she'll be breaking it down in this video. But she's actually giving as a bombshell, she's actually arguing here that the ANC is extremely divided. Most of the struggles we're seeing in the GNU now, according to Helen Zille, comes from the fact that the ANC right now is preparing for a succession of President Ramaphosa, all right? So there are many factions trying to really fight for who would succeed President Ramaphosa. And we know that these succession plans usually have a lot of ramifications on the general state of things. So she's arguing that Paul Mashatile is a major player. I've known that one for sure all the time. Paul Mashatile is actually there. I think naturally, he should be the one to step in, because usually, according to the ANC's Lehotla, when they do this kind of like the conferences, the transitional conferences, all of that. The vice presidents have actually always just stepped in to replace, all right? So Paul Mashatile might end up becoming the next president of South Africa. Now, Paul Mashatile's scenario, Paul Mashatile's preferences is really important to understand, especially the implications for South Africa's economy and growth and all that, because according to Helen Zille, Paul Mashatile doesn't really want the DA in the government, all right? And so according to Helen Zille, right, Paul Mashatile would prefer an EFF, MK, ANC allegiance or alliance in government, while the DA, probably FF Plus and all others, will be kicked out. But she then gives another bombshell, saying that even Mbalula also wants to succeed President Ramaphosa, and he's also really cooking, and it's his own faction. This is according to Helen Zille. Now you'll be listening to it in this video. And remember the video I made with Rob Hersov, when Rob Hersov spoke to Sizwe Mpofu-Welch on his podcast. Rob Hersov argues that President Ramaphosa himself wants a female to succeed him. Sizwe Mpofu-Welch immediately kind of like tried to take a guess that, this Kumbutso Unshaveni, I think she's been a really major force now in the ANC, especially in light of these trade wars with Trump, the whole thing with the Africana, AfriForum and all of that. So she's been a major force. So according to Rob Hersov and Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Welch's discussion, it actually appears, if I'm hearing both of them correctly, that President Ramaphosa probably has maybe this choice, but definitely a female to succeed him. So there's a major war brewing now in the ANC. Mashatile wants to replace Ramaphosa. Mbalula wants to replace Ramaphosa. Probably and allegedly, Ramaphosa wants a female to to succeed him. So she, according to Helen Zille, now this is the challenges now we are seeing falling apart, breaking out in the likes of this whole argument with the VAT increase and all of that, and the shaking up of the GNU. And this is really pathetic. This is really kind of like disturbing, because right now the ANC's she argues generally that the ANC's fight for secession is really holding South Africa back, and why the DA wants to really try to fight for policies that will bring jobs, more jobs, and try to reduce this 33.3%. I think it's even going higher. The unemployment rate is actually getting higher now. This whole thing is actually then causing all this alarm. And then Helen Zille argues that the DA will not be beaten into submission by the ANC, but they'll keep on fighting, holding their ground and fighting, for South Africans. So it's really a challenge. But let's quickly listen to Helen Zille and I'll break down, the reasons why, especially, that taking the matter of this whole VAT passage to court to challenge that and hopefully see if they can challenge the passing of the 0.5 VAT increase by, I think this is the 1st of May. Share your thoughts in the comments.
Let's focus, if we can, on the VAT story. The DA standing firm against it. What are your plans now going forward?
Well, the DA never only has one track in a fight. We try and have multiple tracks, multiple fallback positions. Obviously, plan A was to win concessions in political negotiations. I saw, ironically and quite cynically, that Paul Mashatile said we were in the GNU on the basis of the statement of intent that we both signed. That is true, but the ANC has never once respected any of the clauses of the statement of intent, most particularly not Clause 19 and 19.3, which define sufficient consensus on all GNU decisions. And equally on the budget, they've ignored it because they said it's our way or the highway. And we're not going to give any compromise to you, although we're going to ask for a lot of compromises from the DA. And so this was very, very difficult. And where we are now is this. We have moved from the first track, which is the political negotiation track, to the second track, which is the legal track. We have always had the legal track in abeyance, but you don't want to move on to the legal track unless you've absolutely exhausted all other options in the political track. Now we're on the legal track. We think we have the best possible chance to interdict the VAT increase and to have Clause 7.4 of the VAT Act declared unconstitutional. And that is what we're working very hard to achieve, and in that way, we will stop the VAT increase.
Would you explain it in terms that your voters can understand what it is that you are asking the courts to do here?
Section 7.4 of the VAT Act says that the minister can announce in Parliament that there will be a VAT increase and that it will take effect on the day that he announces, irrespective of whether or not Parliament supports the budget. Now, in this case, Minister Godongwana got up and announced that there would be a 0.5% VAT increase from the 1st of May. It then transpired that he couldn't get his budget through Parliament. But nevertheless, the 0.5% VAT increase is going ahead on the 1st of May because that is the power that the law gives him. Irrespective of whether or not Parliament supports his budget, he can, by way of announcement, effect a VAT increase. Now, our argument is that that is unconstitutional because it effectively gives the minister legislative powers. He gets up and, by virtue of an announcement, makes a law. Now, that violates the principle of the separation of powers. The executive can't make a law. The executive can only implement the laws and execute the laws. That's why they're called the executive. And so we're arguing that that is unconstitutional and he should never have announced a VAT increase and bring it into play when he could not get the budget through Parliament.
But now that he has got the budget through Parliament, wouldn't it be a Pyrrhic victory even if the courts were to rule in your favour?
No, because we have a situation in where we believe that the announcement was irregular in various respects, and we believe that we can still interdict the VAT increase.
Okay, but I suppose the bigger story, and you are going to be meeting...
A crucial thing, of course, is the process in the Portfolio Committee. That's absolutely critical to this whole argument, because the process in the Portfolio Committee was entirely irregular, and the Portfolio Committee never voted, actually, on the fiscal framework in its totality at the end. So the document that appeared before Parliament had not been approved by the Portfolio Committee, and that is another fatal procedural flaw, which we're going after. We look at both process and substance, and we go after whatever we can when we switch to the legal track.
Interesting. When you get the right processes in place, everybody knows where they are, and then knows if they don't follow them, what the consequences are. But as far as the GNU is concerned, this is many people in the business community are worried. We've seen the rand fall when every other emerging market currency has actually risen against the US dollar. The dollar's been being tumbled. So there is a direct correlation between what's happening in South Africa politically and what's happening to the currency or our share price. How are you reading this, and what are the pointers for us now to look out for?
Well, the markets really like the GNU. And investors are saying no GNU, no investment. And we hope the ANC is getting the message. Because we're good at opposition, we do it well. And we're not simply going to stay in the GNU to prop up the ANC implementing its policies in the way that it feels like. We are in the GNU to get South Africa back on a growth path, growth and jobs, which is a large part of the reason that the markets like the GNU, because they know with the DA in there, we'll be getting rid of corruption, we'll be applying investor-friendly policies to get investment, growth, and jobs, and that South Africa has some prospects. And if the ANC wants to kick us out at the same time as we have Trump piling on the tariff pressure, the ANC is going to be responsible for a recession the likes of which we have rarely seen. So let them also take this message on board. The DA is not there as a gopher for the ANC. We are there with 22% of the vote to exercise the mandate of our voters to serve South Africa and to get more people into jobs.
So from what you've said now, it would tend to confirm the talk that the DA is not going to leave the GNU. In fact, that the ANC is going to have to make the decision to kick the DA out. Is that accurate?
No, I'm not necessarily saying that. It depends on the terms that the ANC puts on the table. All of these things are about the divisions in the ANC. The ANC is profoundly divided. Paul Mashatile wants the DA out of the GNU because they want Cyril Ramaphosa out of the ANC. And this is all about factionalism in the ANC, which is a many-headed hydra. Some people in the ANC say, please allow the DA to stay, but make them forfeit 2 cabinet posts, which is a joke because we are already, in terms of the agreement, 3 cabinet posts short. Then there are others who say, kick them out immediately without let or hindrance. And there are others who say, let them stay because the alternative is too ghastly to contemplate. So the ANC is deeply divided, and they're deeply divided around their own internal succession dynamics. Paul Mashatile wants to succeed Cyril Ramaphosa, and they have an elective conference in 2027. Fikile Mbalula wants to succeed Cyril Ramaphosa, and he's up against Paul Mashatile. And so I can continue. The ANC only think of themselves. They have an absolute dearth of talent. They have a succession battle in the middle of a dearth of talent. And here is the DA saying, listen, forget your internal fights. We're trying to rescue South Africa. That is our mandate. And let's look at how we do that.